at least ever since I've been following USC here on BTT, that this is probably the most confident that the USC football program has been. They are operating at a very high recruiting level ever since bringing in Chad Bowden as their general manager, certainly right now. And there's a lot of good vibes coming out of LA. They're saying that's the place to be. And if recruiting is any indication, that certainly has ring true, at least so far. But I think the big question that surrounds the USC Trojans right now is, okay, you're having a lot of recruiting success right now, and that's certainly taking the program in a positive direction. But I think the expectation for Trojan fans is to operate at a college football playoff level, is to operate as to being one of the very best teams in the Big Ten Conference. John Canzano from 750 The Game out of the Portland, Oregon area recently had something very interesting to say on his show, and that is the basis of this segment. We'll start with this. Check it out.
Can Riley close the gap on Oregon? I'm really asking. Do you think USC, in this landscape, with their recruiting territory, they've got Southern California, do you think USC can be USC again? And I'm not even sure, like, Alabama can have the advantage that Alabama once had. Like, I'm convinced they can't, and that's why Nick Saban decided this was a good time to go. Let's see what happens here with a bigger sample size in the second year. But I'm looking at USC, and all USC had to do before in the Pac-12 was it had to get by Oregon, it had to get by Washington, it had to deal with Utah. In the Big Ten Conference, USC has got to deal with Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State and Oregon and Washington if they get their feet back underneath them. And I just think it's a bigger lift and it's a tougher lift.
So John brings up some very interesting points, whether you like John, whether you don't like John. I think some very interesting talking points certainly came out of that soundbite that he recently had on his show. It's going to be much more difficult for USC to be USC like they were previously and really operate at that top level of college football. It's going to be more difficult to do it in this era. It's going to be more difficult where players can transfer out. It's going to be more difficult to do it against the Ohio States, against the Penn States, against the Michigans, against the Oregons of the world than against the Pac-10 teams of the world, certainly from a previous era. Like, the first thought that I really had after listening to this soundbite was really just what I kind of laid out there. It's going to be very difficult for you where USC is now and where those other four programs are right now for USC to consistently break through into that group. And I kind of posted as much on Twitter. My good buddy Doug from the QB11 show, a great Oregon podcast, go check it out if you're a Duck fan, responded and said, I thought something that was very smart. No surprise if you know Doug. That was something very smart, and I thought that really made a lot of sense. That, you know, you maybe take the top four, and if you look at one other team that can make a consistent top five, it's USC. USC has all of the resources, being in a major market like Los Angeles, building the facilities that they are building right now. Now you got an elite general manager, and they got their NIL certainly all figured out, or it appears that they have it certainly more figured out than they did in the past. All of the building blocks are there for USC to be a perennial college football playoff contender, to perennially be a contender within the Big Ten Conference. You look at anybody else in the Big Ten, look at a Big Ten map. I don't think there's another program within the Big Ten Conference that has the resources to consistently. We know that teams are going to jump up there every now and then. Look what Indiana was able to do. Like, Indiana was in there, Michigan was not. There's going to be teams that certainly jump up into that conversation. But to consistently be able to accomplish that, I think USC is the only other program that can make the top four, certainly a top five right now. But let's try to answer the question. Can USC be USC? The first thing that we need to make very clear, dynasties like Pete Carroll at SC, like Nick Saban at Alabama, like some of these dynasties that we've seen over time in college football are going to be really, really tough to accomplish going forward. Because before you could stockpile players, I call it over-recruiting. Now you can't do that anymore. You've got NIL, you're going to have rev sharing, you have the transfer portal. There's a lot more player movement, player retainment, and building that crazy talented depth that we saw at USC, that we saw at Alabama, that we saw at some of these other programs is going to be insanely difficult. When we talk about USC being USC, I don't know if anybody's going to be like going to 3 straight national championship games. I think there's going to be a lot of more parity, I think, in college football, certainly right now. You're going to build a team up, and that's going to be a really good national championship level team. The team next year, that's going to be much more difficult to really stay at that type of level. Like you've seen even what happened with Georgia as we've progressed into this era as well. These SEC teams aren't able to over-recruit and hang on, and their same goes for some Big Ten teams as well. So I think that's the first thing that we need to establish right out of the gate. I talked about when USC was USC, and I have a tweet here within this graphic on YouTube from On3's JD Piquel that said, the last time USC locked up California, this is what was happening. And it's Pete Carroll raising the old glass trophy and USC dominating the sport. And that's the direction that USC is going right now. Okay? So that was the building block to USC's success back then. And that's what USC is getting back to doing, is making Southern California a USC territory again. We know the type of talent that comes out of that area. But I think that's only one piece to the puzzle. Okay? That's only one piece. There's a lot of pieces that you got to put in. Development is another thing. When Pete Carroll was the head coach, they brought in the best of the best and they developed the best of the best. And they created first-round NFL draft picks and second-round NFL draft picks. And Troy Polamalu and Ray Malaluga and Sean Cody and Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and all of these guys were very, very high-level draft picks in the National Football League. The talent was there and the development was there. When you have a guy with Lincoln Riley, with this particular staff, in this particular area, where is the development? I think those are questions that are still being answered right now. We've seen what Lincoln Riley can do in terms of development from the quarterback position. What about the rest of this team? What about the rest of this offense? You look to the development side, on the defensive side of the football, last year was a really good start. All right, to the development piece. I think there's still certainly some things to figure out. Like, here's the thing. When I look at USC, and this is crazy to say about a Lincoln Riley team, but I'm going to say it anyway. I say crazy stuff sometimes. But I'm more excited about the defensive side of the ball than I am about the offensive side of the ball. That is a compliment to the staff that they have assembled on the defensive side of the football, with Danton Lynn, Rob Ryan coming in as the linebackers coach, Henderson on the defensive line, Belk back there in the secondary. Like, they've assembled a really, really good defensive staff. So although they're bringing in really good talent from Southern California, now they need to be able to develop that talent and really move this program forward. This is a program that has taken a couple of steps down over time these last couple of seasons. So although they're bringing in great Southern California recruiting, they need to be able to take that to the next level to develop it. And in today's day and age of college football, you need to be able to retain it. You need to make commitment signees. You need to make signees NFL draft picks. Will USC be able to accomplish that? Those are puzzle pieces that need to be put together. How does USC get back to being USC? Like, where is the journey? It's going to be a more difficult journey than what it was before. Like, we know where USC stood in terms of historically being one of the most, if not the most dominant team, certainly out there on the West Coast. Now in this iteration of the Big Ten, and this is like the toughest era of college football, especially if you are in a Power 2 conference. Like, you're playing much more difficult competition, especially if you're an old West Coast team. You're playing much more difficult competition week in and week out. So it's much more difficult to get to that 10-win level, to that 11-win level, to that type of level. Like, you look at this thing for USC, like, if they're going to get back to that type of level, they're going to need to win a big game. They're going to need to beat a really good football team. Like on next year's schedule, if they really want to create that bridge to 2026, 2027 being a playoff team and really get USC back to being USC, you need to beat somebody like a Notre Dame. I know Michigan was down last year, but beating Michigan would really help, especially if they end up being a pretty damn good football team. Maybe going into Autzen and beating somebody like Oregon. If you want to get USC back to being USC soon and really take advantage of these recruiting classes, you need to win big games. It comes down to the on-the-field performance. I love what Chad Bowden is doing from the general manager seat right now. But in the end, USC getting back to USC, it's more than just recruiting. It's winning on the football field. How much do you trust that Lincoln Riley is going to get one of those big wins? Right now, my trust isn't that high. Like when I look at USC and all the great things that are happening right now, and there are fantastic things happening in Los Angeles, California, Lincoln Riley isn't talked about. You're talking about all these recruits, the Jonas Williams coming up, the Tomahini Tapoy, both those guys flipping over from Oregon to USC. You talk about the new GM. You talk about the defensive coaching staff. You don't mention Lincoln Riley because USC is creating all this positivity. USC is creating all this momentum, maybe despite Lincoln Riley right now. If USC wants to consistently get to the top of the mountain, we need to see that Lincoln Riley can be a top coach in college football. That is a big determining factor now more than ever. It's going to be very interesting to see how things play out for the Trojans